To be continued. Although the count is not yet complete, one thing is already clear. The election result is painful but unambiguous. The responsibility and opportunity to govern was not given to us. I congratulate the winning party.
The leader of the Hungarian opposition, Péter Magyar, has already announced his victory in the parliamentary elections, and the votes that have already been counted show that the opposition party TISA is indeed gaining a constitutional majority in the Hungarian parliament, namely 135 seats, although I emphasize not all the votes have been counted yet. At the same time, large-scale protests have begun in Budapest as people await the announcement of the official results. I should note right away that it is specifically supporters of the TISA party who are protesting, and I would even say they are celebrating this victory because today Hungary also recorded a record turnout. The parliamentary elections on Sunday saw the highest voter turnout in Hungary's post-communist history. Almost 78% of citizens went to the polls. Pro-Russian politician Viktor Orban, who has been in power for 16 years and was seeking his fifth consecutive election victory, received support from US President Donald Trump, but it did not help him win. At the same time, it should be understood that due to the unfair and very complicated electoral system in Hungary, the result can still be changed at the last moment, despite the large gap in votes. And now we'll figure this out. I'll explain where the catch might be. In addition, it's important to remember that even if the winner, Péter Magyar, becomes the new prime minister, Orbán has built such a system of power in the country that it will be very difficult for the new prime minister to quickly implement all the promised reforms. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment you want. And friends, if you find this episode interesting and useful, I ask you to support the work of this YouTube channel with your donation or sponsorship on YouTube or with a paid subscription. All the links and details on how to do this are in the description of this video. Or you can scan the QR code on your screens to go to the Buy Me a Coffee platform. This is the easiest way to support the work of this channel, and I will be grateful to you for it. And subscribe to my Telegram channel Pitchy News. The link is also in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. So, the leader of the Hungarian opposition party TISA, Péter Magyar, has already declared his party's victory, even though the vote counting is still ongoing. Péter Magyar has already stated that Viktor Orban personally congratulated him on his victory in these elections. And now more than 50% of the ballots have already been counted in Hungary. And based on these results, the TISA party is gaining a constitutional majority in the Hungarian parliament, namely 135 seats. Now we will analyze all of this in great detail. I should note that by law, the final voting results will not be published until April 18. The result will of course be known earlier. Immediately after the polling stations in Hungary closed, the results of two public opinion polls conducted right before the parliamentary elections in Hungary were published. And both predict, after all, a victory for the opposition party TISA led by Péter Magyar. According to the median poll, TISA will receive at least 57% of the votes, which is 135 seats in parliament. Right now, this matches up. If it stays this way, it will be a turning point, I would even say a revolution in Hungarian politics, because the opposition will get 2/3 of the votes, which means a constitutional majority in parliament. And thus, it will be able to make most decisions on its own. And what's very important, they will be able to appoint their own prime minister, namely Péter Magyar. Meanwhile, Orbán will go into opposition. But at the same time, according to a TVN Research Center poll, Magyar will get 55% and 132 seats in parliament, which is one vote less than 2/3 in parliament. That's bad. Polls give Orbán's Fidesz party 38% of the votes. I should note that the headquarters of the TISA party is located right across from the Hungarian parliament in Budapest. Anyone who has been to Budapest understands exactly where this is. And tonight, large rallies of Orbán's opponents and supporters of the TISA party immediately gathered there. And to the loud applause of his supporters on the streets, Peter Magyar stated that Tisza views the election results with cautious optimism, but understands that it has won. He said that the turnout was extremely high, which suggests that about 6 million people voted. It shows that Hungarians understand how important these elections were. I should note that it was mainly young people who voted for Magyar. And it was these young people who contributed to such a high turnout in the elections. Magyar drew attention to the unequal conditions in the elections that Prime Minister Viktor Orban has created during his 16 years in office. Magyar thanked the independent observers who volunteered to monitor the elections and the voting process. And mind you, about 20,000 such observers from the Tisza party were officially registered. What is also important is that today's parliamentary elections recorded the highest voter turnout in the entire post-communist history of the country. According to the National Electoral Commission, as of 6:30 p.m. local time, right before the polling stations closed, almost 78% of eligible voters participated. Voter turnout in Budapest and some major cities even exceeded 80%. And here's an interesting point, because it was mainly in the cities that people voted for Magyar. While Viktor Orbán's core electorate is made up of small towns and villages, despite claims of fraud, Hungarian President Tamás Sullyok stated that the elections were successful and that the record-high turnout means the winner will receive a legitimate mandate. And Viktor Orbán, even if he really wants to, will not be able to challenge the victory of Peter Magyar. Well, because 78% of voters came and cast their ballots. But here it's important to remember that Hungary has a very complicated, tricky electoral system that might not allow the winner to carry out his reforms. And it might seem like there's a victory, it's already in the bag, but I repeat, at this point only 50% of the votes have been counted. Next, that very complicated electoral system that Viktor Orbán set up comes into play, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. And the Hungarian parliament, known as the National Assembly, consists of 199 seats, 199 deputies. The distribution of seats in parliament happens in two different ways. 106 people are elected in single-member districts, where each electoral district elects one candidate. That is, there are 106 districts, one is chosen in each, and there you have 106 deputies. The winner is the one who gets the most votes in their district, even if the share of votes they receive is less than 50%. It doesn't matter, the main thing is to have more than your opponent. So most of parliament is made up of single-member district representatives. Well, in Ukraine, people understand very well what that means. But this is where things get more complicated. The remaining 93 seats in parliament are allocated through voting on national party lists. Overall, these seats are distributed based on the share of votes cast for each party. Well, let's say, if a party gets, let's say, how much? 50%, 57. So yes, the Tisza party is projected to get 57% of the votes. So they get 57% of the votes. That means they receive exactly 57% of these 93 seats. This is an important point that should be noted. However, there are of course some caveats that Viktor Orbán specifically introduced to confuse the voter, and that creates a very hybrid but legal way to falsify the results. In order to qualify for any of the 93 seats, each party must receive at least 5% of the votes. This is the threshold. And the same system operates, for example, in Ukraine. There's nothing unusual about it. But, and this is where it gets most interesting, in Hungary there are also so-called surplus votes. Bonus votes, so what are they? Remember the voting in single-member districts? Well, here's the thing. A portion of the votes that the winner received in the district is automatically transferred to the party he represented. And so, if Orbán's party gets, for example, 38% of the votes, but he has a lot of single-member district candidates who received more than 50% of the votes in their districts, then Orbán's party can be given these surplus votes. That is, in the end, they can slightly recalculate the results and say, listen, in the single-member districts, a lot of people voted for our representatives, so we just need to get a little bonus from the surplus votes. If you're already confused, let me add that's not everything yet. To make the situation even more complicated, citizens of Hungary who belong to one of the 13 officially recognized ethnic minorities such as Roma, Slovaks, Germans and so on can choose not to vote for the national party list and instead vote for a separate candidate from the national list for these minorities. And that's not all. If a citizen of Hungary has a registered address, meaning they are registered at some address, they receive 2 ballots in the elections, one for the party and another for the single-member electoral district. But people who do not have a registered address in Hungary can only vote for national party lists. And all this confusion has always helped Orbán's party to gather the majority of votes, even if they didn't quite reach it through the party vote. That's exactly why I wouldn't rush to announce the election results just yet. So it's obvious that the Tisza party is winning the majority, but what kind of majority it will be is still up in the air. Well, critics of Viktor Orban claim that a significant part of his electoral success has always been based on finding supposed external enemies. Every election cycle has been remembered for a new external threat. At first, Viktor Orban spoke out against various public organizations, which, according to him, were financed by Soros, who, has a certain nationality himself. Then Viktor Orban spoke out against liberal institutions, which supposedly were imposing some ideas from Brussels on Hungary, while he defended the national, even nationalist sovereignty of the country. Then migrants became the problem. He says, that's it, we are fighting against migrants, and that was the idea of the election campaign. Then Viktor Orban built his campaign against the LGBT+ movement. It turned out that LGBT was the main evil, so the whole campaign was built around this, traditional values and so on. Well, this year the main opponent is Ukraine and Volodymyr Zelensky, who supposedly wanted to drag the Hungarians into the war with the Russians. The story of Peter Magyar himself, who could now become the new Prime Minister of Hungary, is also interesting. If you missed it, the leader of the opposition party, Tisza, Peter Magyar, used to be a supporter of Viktor Orban and was even a member of his party and even a member of his team. Because at one time, Orban positioned himself as a liberal anti-communist. Magyar left Orban's party amid major scandals, some of which he himself initiated because he was inside Orban's team. Let me remind you, last year Orban's government was shaken by public outrage after it became known that the then president of Hungary, Katalin Novak, pardoned a former official who had been convicted of helping to cover up cases of abuse against underage boys in an orphanage. She covered it up. But you might wonder, what does this story have to do with Peter Magyar? Keep listening. Judith Varga, who was serving as Minister of Justice in Viktor Orban's government at the time, was also involved in this pardon. The female officials who allegedly committed violence against boys in the orphanage. And both women eventually resigned, while Viktor Orban simply pretended that he hadn't seen anything and didn't know anything. And it gets even more interesting because that very Judith Varga was married to Peter Magyar. She's his ex-wife. As a result, Magyar began publicly revealing secrets about Orban's team, because he himself was part of that team, and his wife was also part of that team. He stated that several families own half of the country. The fight against corruption became one of the main topics of Magyar's election campaign. He stated that Orban is a hypocrite who only pretends to be a defender of national sovereignty against the liberal ideology of Brussels. Yes, in fact, Magyar insists that this mask simply helped Orban amass a huge fortune while the duped voters didn't understand what was happening. And what's also important is that Magyar built his election campaign on discussing Hungary's internal everyday problems. There, it ranged from economic stagnation to the poor state of healthcare. Meanwhile, Viktor Orban mainly built his campaign on foreign policy issues. Magyar, on the other hand, said almost nothing about his position regarding Russia's war against Ukraine or about Hungary's relations with the European Union. Overall, the opposition party, the TISA party, is clearly winning in terms of vote share, but the question is what kind of victory it will be. Because if the TISA party, based on the vote percentages, does not win 2/3 of the seats in parliament, then Orbán's party may form a coalition with even more far-right politicians. In order to prevent Magyar from simply becoming the country's prime minister, and then things will go badly because all those promises that the TISA party led by Magyar announced, let's put it this way, they will remain just words because Orbán will not allow them to be implemented simply due to the coalition in parliament and the fact that Magyar will not be the prime minister. And at this moment, it is known that Viktor Orbán has officially admitted defeat, and now I will quote him. The election results, although not final, are clear and understandable. We did not receive the responsibility and opportunity to govern the country. I congratulated the winning party. Well, Orbán has conceded defeat, the TISA party is winning, so now we'll be watching for the first statements. For us as Ukrainians, the most important thing is to understand what Peter Magyar's position will be regarding Ukraine, European integration, whether he will support Ukraine's accession to the European Union, and so on and so forth. Because, let me emphasize again, there have been statements, but they are very vague. So, that's why I can't say that he will be similar to Orbán. He clearly won't be a pro-Russian puppet. But nevertheless, as he himself stated, I will primarily defend the interests of Hungarians, which by the way is to be welcomed. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. And friends, if you found this episode interesting and useful, I would appreciate your support because this YouTube channel exists thanks to your support. You can support it with a donation, a paid subscription, or sponsorship on YouTube. You can click the join button under the video and become a sponsor of this channel. Or you can use the QR code on your screens, or in the description of this video you'll find all the links and details on how to support the Alexei Peachy channel. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.